Always a pleasure to have you on board here on Good Morning Kenya. We continue with the show. My name is Migwi. Now we are talking about the International Day for Combating Hate Speech. And combating hate speech, addressing misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. And in studio, I'm joined by Duncan Maigua, who is a Strategic Communication Officer at CRECO, which is Constitution Reform Consortium. Karibu sana to the program. How are you doing this morning?
Thank you. I'm good.
Yes.
It's Constitution and Reform Education Consortium.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, combating hate speech, addressing and we are addressing through misinformation, disinformation.
Yes.
What is misinformation, disinformation, and fake news?
All right. So I think it's a very good note to start from that point. And thank you so much, Mike, for welcoming me to KBC Channel 1. I'm really happy. And to the definitions, misinformation is unintentional. Is an intentional spreading of information. For instance, unintentional, for instance, interpretation of information and all that. But disinformation is when you intentionally want to spread information that is not correct. Yeah. But misinformation is when it is unintentional. And then now, of course, now when we now break down to fake news, that is now when we have, we talk about news that break, but are fake. Yeah. Yes. And then, of course, there are also other tabs such as malinformation. These are very wide scope on information disorders. Yes. That's what we call them. And malinformation is now when we have information, spreading information that is not supposed to be spread. For instance, we have a few cases in Kenya when we have someone spreading some information, photos, videos about someone in a lodging in a very compromising situation. Why would you spread that? That is malinformation. Yes, but misinformation is unintentional. Disinformation is intentional. Yes.
Now, the news and disinformation, fake news and disinformation are a common problem in democratic systems.
Yes.
How best can they be addressed to ensure that, because they do not spur hate speech?
All right.
Yes.
So I think one very common way in which, especially in the African continent and context also,
yes.
What most of the time we do is to put in laws and regulations, policies, to try and address the issues around misinformation and disinformation. But of course, it comes with the downside of it, because we have issues with the balancing act.
Yes.
How do you balance between regulating misinformation, disinformation, and fake news, and also the freedom of expression? How do you balance between that? Because we also have a few countries here and there, which I may not want to mention and to name names, where people have used regulation to curtail the freedom of expression amongst their citizens. But I think besides, and that is why, okay, for instance, just to mention from our end as an organization, what we are trying to, how we are trying to address and advocate for is for what we call self-regulation, because we have realized that in as much as we have laws that could help curb misinformation, disinformation, and fake news, because this is what actually is, that is where actually hate speech stems from. So in as much as we have laws and we have all that, we are talking about the power is in your hands to stop this, because you know very well, sometimes you have even accounts that are bots. We have accounts that you can not even trace, for instance, if it is social media platforms. So it is not, the laws have not been, what I can say, comprehensive in terms of addressing misinformation and disinformation to stop them from propagating hate speech. Yes.
Which means also the level of accountabilities on editorial processes on digital platforms is not the same as the level of editorial expectations that are placed on traditional media?
Sure, I agree, correct. Because, for instance, you know, initially, even I know very well you had this even in school when you were studying journalism.
Yes.
Definitely one of the, when we would be asked a question, what is the role of the media? And we will say gatekeeping, you know, it's a watchdog, you know, quite a number of.
Yeah.
But nowadays, talking about gatekeeping, is it really, is the media really able also to, for instance, the traditional media able to gatekeep, for instance, information? Because nowadays we have what we call, it's like an outbreak of information. Let me just use that, what we are now calling infodemic. It's like we are in a pandemic whereby information is flowing freely and controls have been really limited. So and now getting to what you're saying about accountability, it's very hard. There was this research, Mike, that was done that by Mozilla Foundation. That was during Kenya's election, whereby and it was they were bringing this aspect where they were saying that from a dancing app to a political machinery, that is TikTok. Yes. Whereby these people were saying that. That in as much as these social media companies have the funding and all that to stop the spread of misinformation and disinformation, they are not able to do that, and especially within our context. For instance, someone from Rift Valley, if they say something in their mother tongue, someone from Central, if they say something in their mother tongue, it can be flagged. It can be flagged. So the level of accountability, especially on social media platforms, will only come, will only be achieved. Accountability can only be achieved through self-regulation, especially within the African context. But even in the common dialects, it's still happening in its own sneaky way and cheeky way, and it's still happening. Yes.
How about the aspect of fighting disinformation with information? Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible. Actually, if you allow me, let me just quote something. There is a scripture whereby, and I'll bring it to context, whereby a story is given of, and I think Jesus was giving this story, and he would say that when a demon leaves someone, it keeps on coming to check to confirm whether the house that it left is still empty. And so when it finds it empty, it goes and gets other stronger, 7 other stronger demons than him, so that they can come and get back to the same house. Now, let me bring this into context. It's the same case that happens with information. For instance, if you deprive people of information, for instance, if you deprive people of information, and recently we saw the Commission of Administrative Justice, that's the Office of the Ombudsman, ordering Nairobi County government to release a specific information. So when there is emptiness in terms of information, that is what we call the information gap. People tend to consume any information. But when people have access to the right information, it empowers them to fight what is fake. So when we want to fight fake news, misinformation, disinformation, that's why we are, again, self-regulation. You, Mike, share the right information. I share the right information. And of course, some of us, even our parents, we see what they go through. They send to us even some very terrorist attack in Nairobi. And so they are sending us as their sons, you know, be careful, I'm praying for you. And it is purely wrong information. Being said that it's coming maybe from the National Police, and it's actually a fake account. So, but yes, I can agree with you that if we want to fight misinformation and disinformation, it's everybody's task to spread the correct information. There's also the aspect of cyber media literacy, because everything now is moving to the digital platforms. What is the role of cyber media literacy in fighting misinformation, disinformation, to prevent sparring hate speech? All right. We have kept, Mike, advocating and telling people that there is need for people to be intentional about upscaling their media literacy, their literacy levels in terms of digital literacy and media literacy as a whole. Let me just use that term. Because, Mike, it is very, very, very difficult sometimes to cope with the pace that things are changing, that things are changing within the digital space. For instance, talking about AI, for instance,
Yes.
It's very possible, Mike, that very soon someone is going to send you a video of you saying something right here in studio, and indeed you're actually on leave. It's very likely.
Yes.
And we have seen some of these examples out here on the digital space.
Yes.
And so it is everyone's prerogative to ensure that they educate themselves and play and be programs that enhance their digital literacy skills, because things are changing. For instance, Mike, if I'm to develop a curriculum, for instance, today, and say this curriculum is addressing issues, is a curriculum that is going to teach people on digital literacy and all that.
Yes.
Maybe in the next 2 months, it needs to be revised. It needs to be revised because things are fast changing, and therefore there has to be a deliberate effort amongst young people, especially because I'm talking about the young people, because they're the biggest propagators of fake news. It is manufactured by different people, including government. Government propagates especially misinformation. Misinformation. Governments really propagate misinformation. And of course now, we now have the bloggers who propagate disinformation. It's very intentional. So we are telling them that you need to be very intentional about upscaling your digital literacy skills. Yes, so it's about intentionality.
Can digital platforms or develop approaches that include the artificial intelligence and human intelligence in curbing misinformation and disinformation? Because we are talking about a situation where there's a lot of content that is shared widely every day. Is it possible for that to happen?
Yes, it is possible. We have seen a few efforts by some also media houses, sometimes trying to, especially international media houses, sometimes trying to establish desks to fight misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. But now, again, trying to cope with these digital platforms and the pace at which they go, it's really a deal. It's such a great deal. And therefore, so for instance, maybe just to bring in, when we bring in now the whole issue about AI, artificial intelligence, of course we have seen also even media houses using a few photos here and there, AI generated and all that. But again, how does the media come on board to ensure that there is authenticity in as much as AI is assistive. It was coming to be assistive.
Yes.
So, but how can the media, maybe what we can talk about is how the media can demonstrate proper use of AI. Yes.
Now, when it's still on that, what is the role of government in all this? Because in as far as we may say we want to fight hate speech, misinformation and disinformation, the government has a role. Talk about that.
Yeah, it does. It does, and as I said earlier, what the government mostly has done is to really push for the implementation of these laws. For instance, the Cyber Crimes, Computer Misuse and Cyber Crimes Act, and all that, and Elections Offences Act, which also addresses a few issues on publication of false information.
Yes.
And we have seen most of the time government working around there are times they even do that whenever only it's convenient to them.
Yes.
Because, for instance, we have, today is International Day for Countering Hate Speech.
Yes.
We have people in government who daily propagate hate speech. Yes. Daily, on a daily, we see them. But rarely would you see any action taken upon them, unlike people who are not in government. When they propagate such information, action is taken upon them. So government has a role, of course, to make sure that the law takes its course. Yes. But again, for us, and what I would actually advocate for is when the government takes actions and funds initiatives to educate young people on how they can be digital literate,
Yes.
so that the people can be empowered and we can have a responsible young people in society.
Tukimalizia.
Yes.
Vijana tuchanuke. It's one of the themes for this year's International Day for Combating Hate Speech. What informed that?
All right.
Yes.
So Vijana Tuchanuke is an initiative by CRECO, the organization I work in, that is Constitution and Reform Education Consortium. And what we are telling young people is that time has come for you to wise up.
Yes.
Because we have realized that if young people do not rise up to the occasion and understand that power is in their hands, because they are the users of these gadgets, they are the greatest propagators of what has been manufactured, if not the source.
Yeah.
And we are telling them to wise up. And wising up is knowing that fake news, and actually talking about today, hate speech, it's in bad taste. It's not funny. Sometimes you have made cultural stereotypes, religious stereotypes. We have actually even made, for instance, political sentiments to be funny when they are against or they are in bad taste. And sometimes we have, as young people, propagated that because we think it's funny. We are telling them it's not funny. Let us wise up. There are people who are greatly affected by this. Just to mention Mike real quick, because I know time is not on our side. One of the Kenya's champions, you remember in an interview with one of the international media houses, spread against him, and it was totally false. It's affecting a family, it's affecting an individual, it's affecting even policy. Sometimes when we spread this information, it even makes people to make wrong decisions. So let us wise up as young people. That is where it's coming from.
Yes.
Yes.
Asante sana. Thank you for making time. There's a lot to talk about in this area, but time is not on our side.
Yes.
But maybe another time we'll get into details, kabisa. That is Duncan Maigua, who is a strategic communication officer at Constitution and Reform Education Consortium, speaking to us about combating hate speech on this day that we are marking International Day of Countering Hate Speech, which is marked on 18th of June. This is where we cap matters. Good morning, Kenya. Thank you for watching the show. My name is Mike Migwi. Let's do this again tomorrow morning. Good morning.